everyone, it's Julia. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am working on a very easy free motion applique project. I'm easing back into it. I've been busy with my little summer shop, but I'll have to say we had a successful Memorial weekend and everything is set up and looking good, and there was a lot of people out. Here in Minnesota, we went from snow to 90. It was a very hot weekend, but everybody was anxious to get back and it was fun to see everybody. So I'm back with an easy project here. I'm going to be working on a pillow. This is going to measure 12 by 12, a little accent pillow. I'm using white denim. So I have two pieces of the white denim, and then I always back the top of my pillows with a quilter's fleece, and this is like a warm and natural fleece. Another thing I wanted to do for this, because I'm using white denim, is I am going to be putting corners on this pillow. The corners not only protect the pillow a little bit, just gives it, you know, white gets dirty so easily, so it just protects the corners a little, but also adds a nice little touch to it. A viewer actually mentioned about adding the corners to my pillows. A few weeks back I uploaded a video on how I added the corners to zippered pouches, and this is going to be done in much the same way. It's a really good idea to add to pillows, just for another little cute little accent. This is the design that I'm working on. I just thought it's whimsical and fun. It says, "I love you a lot'll. It's like a little, only a lot." And then it has this heart in the center. I'm going to be doing a scrappy applique, similar to the llama applique that I did a few weeks back. I'm going to be linking all these videos up if you missed them and you want to go back. But I'm going to be doing the applique in much the same way. I actually have the applique already done, and I just used scraps of fabric in strips, and I glued it to the back of a heat and bond Lite. And the llama video goes through all the steps and how I do that. And so now this is actually a scrappy looking applique where I can take and peel the back of this heat and bond, and I have an iron-on little applique. So that is what's going to be going in the center of my pillow. I decided I wanted to add the words with free motion. Just free motion stitching, and I can see, because this is just a white denim, I can see the placement of those letters really easily just by laying this underneath that top layer. And I'm going to be just drawing or just outlining these letters using a water-soluble fabric. This is a Mark Be Gone. Everything that I use will be linked down below if you want to see exactly what I'm using. When I do any kind of a pillow, I want to just be a little bit mindful of the design being a little bit closer to the top and not smack in the middle. Just because an accent pillow sits on like a sofa or a chair or a bench, and you lose a little bit of that design at the bottom. So I am moving it up just a bit. That looks good, and it's basically just tracing this. Now I don't think you probably can see the letters, but they're very readable for me here. So I'm just going to be outlining this with my Mark Be Gone. I can also see where the outline of this heart is. I'm going to peel this heat and bond off and iron it in place. Honestly, I should have probably done this before I drew the letters on. I'm going to try not to hit my iron on the letters. I will be taking the top layer and the fleece layer over to my sewing machine, and with free motion stitching I'm going to be attaching the applique and adding a lot of decorative fun stitches on this, and also doing the stitching. And I'm going to be using black on the stitching. I'm probably going to use maybe a pink and maybe some other different colors on this. I also thought about adding some lace on the applique just for another added little look, and I do like that. I think I'm going to add that. And this is just going to be attached right with the stitching. That's one thing that's so fun about free motion stitching is you can just add little bits right when you're sewing. And it just makes for a really fun design, and it's just whimsical, and I just love it. Also wondering if I should add another color with that little... No, I think I'm just going to stick with that. I'm going to set up my sewing machine so you can see what I'm doing, and we're just going to create with stitches. I have chosen a variegated pink thread. This is the Coats & Clark variegated thread, and I really love this. I get it at Joann Fabrics. They usually or sometimes run a sale on their thread, and I'll just pick up the several spools then. There's a lot of thread on it, and it just feeds through really nice. I really do enjoy this. But not everybody has a built-in like cone thread holder on their sewing machine. I did have a viewer comment on that, or on how to get to use these on your regular sewing machine. And this is a little thing that you can pick up. Again, I'll link it down below for you. And it is just a freestanding cone thread holder that you can use if your machine doesn't have a cone thread holder. It just sits in here. You just and you just basically thread your sewing machine like you normally would. This is either sitting behind my sewing machine or next to it, whatever works best for you, and that is how you can use your cone thread on your regular sewing machine. I have my sewing machine set up for free motion stitching. I have my free motion foot on. Sometimes this is called a quilting foot, or sometimes it's called a darning foot. I have my feed dogs dropped, so I'm going to be doing the motion on this. I do have my stitch length set to 0. I have my pink thread on. I also had a viewer ask, sometimes she sees videos where people use a hoop, like I have a tension hoop here, and sometimes I don't use a hoop. And when I sew with a fleece batting behind my work, I do not use the hoop at all. If I have just a single layer of fabric that I am free motioning on, I always use a hoop. Lowering my foot, and as I go, you're going to just see me do the moving. You're also going to, I'm just going to be meander stitching on this, adding some interesting maybe stitches, filling in a little bit, catching the edges of each of these stripes, and just having some fun with it. This is free motion, and that's what it's all about. Clipping my thread. I'm also going to be outlining the heart with my stitches, and I do like to go over the outlines more than once. It gives it more of a sketched on look. I just hooked a little bit of a lace in this. I hooked it underneath my presser foot. That happens once in a while. I just wasn't paying close enough attention. I'm just going to snip that off just to free up my foot. I kind of like the fact that this lace is loose at the bottom, and I'm going to leave that. I'm going to go on to my black thread and start with my letters. I do have a decorative stitch on my sewing machine that has hearts. I'm going to add some decorative stitching on this also, and maybe in the black thread. It's onto my letters, and this is something that I've been practicing this whole year, just trying to get better at writing with my sewing machine with free motion. It just takes practice, and you slow down. It's actually pretty fun and really not that hard to do. I did use a font on my computer for this, the letters, and they're not joined or they're not cursive. And so as I do this, I'm going to make them cursive so I don't have to stop and start so often. Now when I do start, I'm going to be doing just a little bit of a back and forth motion, similar to when you just backstitch on your sewing machine, and it's going to lock that in. And then I'll cut my thread. I'm trimming my sides just to get everything even. I'll be removing my marks but I wanted to show you the stitching. You'll see all sorts of different zigzaggy meander stitching that I did with the free motion. And then I added the heart decorative stitch and also the leaf decorative stitch. And a close-up of some of my letters. I get off a little bit, but I like the free motion and the sketched on look of it. The fabric that I'm using for the circles, for the corners, is a suede. It's not a real suede, it's made out of polyester. It has a knit back, and this one happens to have some decorative stitching. This usually comes 60 inches wide, and most fabric stores carry it. I actually picked this just up my local Walmart store has some fabrics, and they do have some suedes there. I like them because they don't fray, and you do want to use some kind of a fabric that doesn't fray for these corners. I just do around something that I found in my kitchen. This was like a lid or a small bowl, but you want this measures about 4.5 inches across, and you don't want to go much smaller than that. I would say between 4 and 6 inches, 5 inches, somewhere along those lines. Otherwise, the corners are just going to get too small. The first thing you want to do is to cut this in half. The next step is to sew across the top of your pillow, just across the top, and I'm going to be taking approximately a 1/2 inch seam allowance for that. I've sewn across the top of my pillow now with the right sides together, so I have my front, my 2 layers, and my back. Now I want to open up this seam and press it flat. Just I'm finger pressing the center just to get I want the center of the half circle right on the seam. You can either pin this in place or use your little clips for this part. to my sewing machine now, and then with brown thread, I'm just going to edge stitch this into place. I'm going to be closing up my bottom, very similar to how I closed up the top. Right sides together. I'm going to be taking in a 1/2 inch seam allowance, but this time I am going to be leaving a space approximately 4 or 5 inches in the center, so I have room to stuff my pillow. So I'm going to be taking that stitch, and then we'll be going to be adding the corners to the bottom of the pillow. I do have a tube now with a hole in the middle of this bottom. Opening up my seams again and pressing those flat. And adding the bottom half circles the same way as I did the top. Getting the centers lined up, pinning or clipping into place, and then I'll be edge stitching these also. Just taking them to the sewing machine, just being careful not to catch anything underneath. The next thing is to close up the side seams of my pillow. Wanting just to make sure that these all line up, the corners are even, and then taking a 1/2 inch seam allowance again on both sides. I'm trimming my corners just to get some of the bulk out before I turn my pillow right sides out. Turning, and then I'll be pressing everything nice and flat. Using a wooden pokey dowel thing to poke out the corners. I have my pillow pressed and turned, also pressed under the seam allowance on the bottom, and it's onto stuffing. I have shared this before in other videos, but my favorite stuffing is the cluster stuff by Morning Glory. I will link it again down below. And also up above, I'll link a video where I show how I close my pillows. I do use my zipper foot, and I do sew them with the sewing machine, sew it shut. So I'll be sure to link that. And also at the end, I'm going to include some pictures of wall hanging that I did with this same design, and also some finished pictures of the pillow. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you have a chance to create. Bye for now.